Hello and welcome back to coverage here at GP Oakland. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Eduardo Sejgalik, and we are all set up for round number 14. Now we are down the stretch here on day 2 of this GP, and the top 8 is starting to come into focus for some of these players. But as we see with our 2 main feature match players, Steven Solis and Paul Rietzel, they are at 11-2. A loss effectively eliminates them from top 8 competition. And look at this start by Paul Rietzel.
Already starting with Mox Opal Ancient Stirrings. Yeah, I mean, he had the option to play Arcbound Worker, but his hand is Fret Light, so it makes sense to play Stirrings and keep Arcbound Worker for animation module. Try to build an army in a can, so to speak. On Steven's side, this is the more aggressive version of the Izzet Phoenix. We've seen a more mid-range version from Ely, who's at 12-0-1. Playing Crackling Drakes. Those are in the sideboard for Steven. Preferring the more aggressive Monastery Swift Spear Mutagenic Growth build. And yeah, Arcbound Ravager with animation module. Paul Rietzel on the draw, but already going ahead on mana.
That's right. He could be significantly ahead in a turn or two. The Monastery Swift Spear, a fine start here for the Izzet Phoenix deck. And we did see Paul Rietzel play against Michael Burnett earlier, and he lost to him. And game 1 went Monastery Swift Spear, and then it was kind of insane, but Burnett went Manamorphose, 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 Bolt You, Mutagenic Growth.
Phoenix as well, right?
Yeah. And it was like, okay. And, Paul took 11 or 12 that
Here's
turn.
the start of that.
Oh, no, here we go. Manamorphose number 1.
There was already a Faithless Looting and an Arclight Phoenix in hand. So if Steve... I'm not sure what mana was added. It's tough to know if it was red or blue. With Mutagenic Growth, this is all but guaranteed. This is going to be already...
Double Phoenix in the bin?
That's going to be free
and
spells.
There it is.
+2, so that's 4, 5, 6, 12 damage, turn 2.
Unbelievable. Right? What a start for Steven Solis. Paul Rietzel with a fantastic opening of his own, and it just looks too slow right now.
Just 12 damage.
Wow.
Turn 2, 12. Boom.
Double Arclight Phoenix off of Faithless Looting, Manamorphose, and Mutagenic Growth. Bam! You're at 8, Paul Rietzel.
Sorry, I know you're just starting your turn 2. And Paul's hand is unbelievably strong too. I mean, just drew Hardened Scales. It's turn 2 with a flyer. There might be an out, but this is a ton of damage already.
Incredible.
Paul
should Paul be at 7 actually?
7?
He took 12 that turn and 1 on turn 1, right?
Oh, from the Swift Spear? Yeah, that might be. Let's check. There were free spells played, so Swift Spear's to 4, then +2/+2 is 6, then 6 from Arclight Phoenix, so that's 12. So, you're correct. Paul should be at 7, right?
Maybe we can get a life total check just to be sure.
Yeah, I might have miscounted, a Prowess Trigger could have been missed, but given the spells played and the damage taken, you are correct. I forgot about that Swift Spear attack on turn 1. It is 12 damage. Plus the 1 from the start.
It looks like they're maybe adding it up right now. 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then 12.
Yeah, it's in pairs of free. Free from Phoenix,
Yep.
Free from spells, 1 and 1+2 from Swift Spear plus Growth.
Yep, and then the turn 1 Swift Spear chipped in for 1 with haste. Yeah, so I think the Paul should be at 7.
At least it doesn't make too much of a difference between... I would say 7 and 8, unless Steven has access to Gut Shot in hand. There are 2 in the deck, right? So that would make the difference here. But if Steven said take 11, then that is possible with 1 less Prowess Trigger technically. So that would be it. But even then, I think Steven is in an excellent position. Paul can't really prevent the damage from these 2 Arclight Phoenix next turn, so it would fall to 2 or 1, right? Depending on how this works out. And even then, I don't know how Paul is going to deal lethal damage. Arcbound Ravager and Hardened Scales. Now, that can do miracles. But it's going to require quite one here because Paul playing Arcbound Ravager and Arcbound Worker just won't have enough, it's turn 2. There's only free mana available, so no servo can really be made. The Arcbound Ravager can become extremely large, though, so Paul is going to have to hopefully set up for something like attack with a large Arcbound Worker, Ravager, but even then there's a Swift Spear in front and move to a Ballista, but that's the problem. I don't see it here.
Yeah, the Arclight Phoenixes are just so brutal.
Well, along with
the damage and having
the Swift Spear
later.
dealt 7.
Yeah.
And the Arclights are probably going to deal 12.
Looks like they did decide, though, that Paul was at 7, not 8.
Yeah, that's fine. Again, unless there's a gut shot, and I think in this game it's not going to make a difference, thankfully. So. But yeah, both players firing with some of their best draws. And the other thing for Paul here is if you play Hardened Scales, then you can only play one of those spells between Ravager and Worker. I think the other line Paul's considering maybe here is going something like Hardened Scales, Worker, make a Servo, and then play Ravager as kind of with 2 creatures in play, then Paul could move them around. But I think playing a Ravager and a Worker is probably better here. You could also make Ravager and a Servo to get extra value.
Okay. That's what he does.
Yeah. Maybe keeping the Hardened Scales in hand in order to dissimulate information and make sure that an Arcbound Ravager is in play. That was actually a really tough turn for Paul. I think he just decided on something because you kind of have to make a decision at some point. This might be the best line, but it showcases the complexity of this Hardened Scales deck, where this turn was not simple. It would probably take 10 to 15 minutes to really figure out the most optimal line, but you're in a tournament, you don't have 15 minutes on your hands.
Yeah, this is actually, though, where I think a player like Paul really is advantaged. You know, this is where he excels.
Yeah, just trying. And even if you don't find the best line, you know, it's just about finding the right line within the time given. Here, is it Charm in hand from Steven Solis?
Oh, he's got another Monastery Swift Spear.
Decides not to attack and have 2 blockers available, deciding that these Phoenixes would get the job done, which honestly is pretty accurate. Yeah, and Paul, without having a Ballista or a Ninkmoth Nexus, a Ninkmoth Nexus instead of a Force would actually have Fred and Lethal here. It would have been good enough that Steven needed to be careful. But of course, because then Arcbound Worker could move the counters to Inkmoth Nexus, and then Is the Charm just wouldn't be good enough. But I think here Steven Solis is going to take it down. With 2 blockers, I don't think there's a way around this for Paul.
Yeah, Paul does play out most of his hand. He's just got the 1 card left. But he kind of needs it to be Fog, and it's not.
As long as Steven blocks each creature, we're going to game 2.
Yep, and that's exactly what happens. Paul says, okay, you figured it out. Block, block, and let's go to game number 2. An explosive turn 2 for Steven Solis, and he capitalized on it to pick up game 1 against the Hall of Famer, Paul Rietzel.
Both players' decks really firing on all cylinders, though. I mean,
yes,
we talked about Steven's draw, but Paul's draw was also exceptional. I mean, you had like the turn 1 Mox Opal into using both mana, all the mana, and then drew into Hardened Scales with Arcbound Ravager. Could have really gone over the top. I think on the play, Paul might have been able to take it down, but Steven's draw was really powerful in this spot and too much to overcome. Oh my. Steven Solis has a spicy card for a red-blue deck.
What does he have?
Well, okay, so the cards that normally come in are a Braid, very good against the Hardened Scales deck. Anger of the Gods sometimes comes in. Exiles, Hangerback Walker, pretty important.
Yeah, sometimes there's a bunch of servos laying around. Okay.
Right. Maybe Crackling Drake, but I don't like it in a matchup like this.
Okay.
Triple Stony Silence.
Really?
Yeah.
How is he making that work?
Oh, that's what the fetch lands do, right? You only need to play the 1 Hallowed Fountain.
Okay.
And that's your... And you also are playing 4 mana Morphos, so it's not that unlikely to get there.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and from Paul's side, Nature's Claim is normally pretty important, but he's not going to expect Stony Silence. So with Steven up a game already, it might be enough. Paul won't, only needs to lose 1 game, and Stony Silence does that very well. So Paul may not board in Nature's Claim. Not only a card you want against the Izzet Phoenix deck, at most maybe 1 or 2 in order to kind of gain 4 life, gain tempo. So you might see Paul board 1 in or 2, but just for that gain life and being able to kill your own Hangerback Walker. Otherwise, Dismembers are kind of tough. Thing in the Ice is really the key target. Everything else you don't really want to do. But Thing in the Ice is a real problem card for the Hardened Scales deck. On the play, you can deal with it with Walking Ballista. It's not easy, but it's doable. But I kind of like this 1 or 2 Dismembers. Paul, we saw him in the feature match area in this matchup. Didn't really want the Dismember, though, in this matchup. So if he sticks to the plan from yesterday, you won't see Paul boarding it in. Might have changed mine. Evolutionary Leap is fine against something like Anger of the Gods or Braid. You can get some value, so 1 copy is okay, especially on the play when you might be low on cards. And 2 Tormod Script. I think they get a lot of value. You don't normally want Graveyard Hate against the Arclight Phoenix deck, but they get value because of Ancient Stirrings, Mox Opal being in the deck. But normally, I tend to favor the Izzet Phoenix deck in this matchup.
Okay.
I think
I can see why based on game one, but my goodness.
Yeah. Well, both of the most powerful draws, the Izzet Phoenix deck tends to take over, but it also has a lot of interaction. It's really, and the Hardened Skills deck, that disruption is enough to cold it so that it's hard for the Izzet Phoenix, and then something like Fing in the Ice might be more than enough. 7 damage plus returning your opponent's entire board.
Yeah, and there's not much that Paul can do about that.
No, Dismember or Ballista on 4 are kind of the only real answers to that problem. It's kind of interesting how Fing in the Ice, Awoken Horror, when it came out, people were like looking at it as a sideboard card for a lot of spell-based decks like Storm, and you saw that then he came away, and it's kind of come back and forth depending on which. Basically, if Gutshot sees play, then Fing in the Ice was coming along a lot of that time. And we're seeing Gutshot come again, So Fing in the Ice is coming back to the party. But it hits hard and fast.
It really does, and we've seen that multiple times on camera today as well. Also, I want to reframe this here. We talked about it, excuse me, at the onset of the match here, but put yourself in Paul Rietzel's seat here, right? You're sitting down. You're now down a game. You flew out here. You're at 11-2. You lose a game here, your weekend didn't go the way you wanted. Paul's here to make the top 8, try to pick up a win. On the other side of the table, though, Steven Solis, he plays GPs. He's sitting across from the Hall of Famer Paul Rietzel going, oh my God, I'm up a game. Just get one of these next two, because Paul is an extremely tough opponent, right? He is just going to give you nothing by way of any edge. He'll tell you that, oh, I made a mistake, I did this, I did that. And he's not wrong, when he recognizes these things. But in the aggregate, Paul is extraordinarily tough opponent to sit down across at a GP.
The other thing that's interesting from pointing out mistakes is Paul doesn't really miss a mistake. He'll notice probably almost every incorrect decision. He will always kind of self-doubt, relook at the game, rethink, and is capable for the next matches of processing the information without letting him get down. And it's the hallmark of a great player, right? Understanding where you went right and wrong, but then moving on.
Yeah.
Moving on is super important.
We were talking earlier about, not on air, about some of our favorite players just to watch play, and Paul was on. Well, we each picked 3. Paul was on my list.
Is that because of the picture that's been going out?
What picture?
The one with Paul in 4 different positions.
Oh, I love that meme. Yeah, that thing is great.
Yeah.
And that is not why, but maybe a small contributor. I just think there's a few players, that are just pure professionals, at every stage and every situation, and I think that Paul Rietzel is one of them. And while doing that, while also just being just flat out excellent at the game, is really impressive to me. How's this start here for Paul? It looks pretty unassuming, just an arcbound worker. He's made a grand total of a 1-1, but he can protect it.
I've seen that start, well, maybe not with Basic Forest, but enough times to know it's anything but innocent.
Yes, it really is. Arcbound worker looks so cute and nice, no big deal, just a little bit of value when it dies. It's not. He's going to fire off a gut shot here on it, though.
I think this is fine for
Does
Paul.
Paul just let it happen, or does he memory jar? Always call it. Does he welding jar?
That is a powerful memory jar. No.
Yeah, 0 mana memory jar. He does not use it, by the way. He's got better things to protect, like maybe this.
Hangerback Walker, yeah.
Although Hangerback Walker dying is also not the worst.
Yeah, I don't know how much Paul is playing around Anger of the Gods. I mean, he might suspect the card is in Steven's deck. It doesn't work with Arclight Phoenix, so to speak, but he can always Anger first and then the Arclights come back. And he knows that against blue-red decks, they tend to morph against artifact decks into this semi-control deck. They have some combination of Ancient Grudge, Anger of the Gods. He's not sure what, but he knows there's something.
Now, Welding Jar does work against Anger of the Gods, right?
Yes.
He can use it to protect one of his best threats. Okay.
Right, but do you use it before? Do you use it on another removal spell? That's kind of the thing with Welding Jar is when do you time it?
Also of note, did I see that right, that Steven used the Phyrexian mana to pay for his gut shot to leave up his mountain last turn?
That is true.
So if you're in Paul's seat, what do you take from that? That's what I want to know.
Well, I definitely think that there's one red interaction spell somewhere.
Yeah, Lightning Bolt, of course, comes to mind.
Yeah, so at that point when you don't play Arcbound Ravager, which was Paul's option, which I don't think you'd play anyways. I think it's too open to a lot of different problems. But by playing Walker first anyways, you have more ability to make it larger. And here, Paul really taking advantage of the synergy between Hangerback Walker and Animation Module. If Animation Module
So
resolve,
explain it.
Sure.
Because a lot of people maybe played Animation Module for a little while. If they opened it as a rare or something, but that's a card that's at least relatively new to Modern. So
right.
what is it? What's its role in this deck?
Right. So I mean, in the deck, there's so many +1/+1 counters. Hangerback Walker that we see there, if Animation Module was to resolve, could just tap, add a counter, make a servo every turn. Something like Arcbound Ravager, right? You could essentially. By the way, it's interesting here that the Izzet Charm is not killing the Hangerback Walker and is just in response to Animation Module, which I find interesting here, trying to draw 2. And that might give Paul the signal that something is happening from Steven here. Because if Steven's using Izzet Charm to draw 2, discard 2, I'm thinking something big might be coming.
Well, there's one thing.
Yeah. And here Paul deciding to use the Hangerback Walker right away, not wanting to wait for Steven to untap and say a Braid in response and wasting Paul's opportunity to make a servo. So yeah, so you have the interaction with Hangerback Walker, which you see there. With Arcbound Ravager, it essentially turns into 1 mana, get an Arcbound Ravager trigger. Since you get a counter on it, you can make a servo, re-sacrifice, keep the engine going. With Steel Overseer, you can boost all your creatures, and for each creature you make a servo, so that just cascades completely out of control.
However much mana you have, basically.
Yeah, it just goes out of control. Arcbound Worker, you play it, you get another counter. There's a lot of interactions that Animation Module does, but there's the Stony Silence.
Hello, Manamorphose to make white and something, and then play Stony Silence. How much is that going to shut down Paul Rietzel's game plan here?
That is a huge problem for Paul. It means Hangerback Walker cannot add counters.
It's a 3/3.
2/2 even.
Oh, excuse me, a 2/2.
Darksteel Citadel all of a sudden does nothing. Welding Jar is a 0 mana Darksteel Relic that doesn't have Indestructible.
Oh my goodness. Now, of note here, the Animation Module, while it can't use its activated ability, its triggered ability still does happen.
Yeah, but here, Paul deciding, well, I kind of have to go all out now because of this Stony Silence. I can't really stay back. Deciding, you know what, I'm just going to put the board down and hope for the best, try to get there. But this Anger of the Gods.
Oh boy, he can't even use the Welding Jar either, can he?
Nope, nor the Arcbound Ravager.
Right, and of course, exiling effect means that there will be no 1/1 Thopters. And Steven Solis is looking beautifully positioned here thanks to his sideboard technology. He is blue-red Phoenix, and he splashes
Stony Silence
for Stony Silence off of 1 Hollowed Fountain and those Manamorphos.
Yeah, and I mean, the Manamorphos worked out well here. Essentially, Steven turning into a blue-red control deck. Here we're going to see Thought Scour, maybe Faithless Looting.
This is so funny to me, too.
Oh, another Arc-like Phoenix.
Yeah,
why not?
Phoenix.
This is going to be 11 damage towards... Actually, there's probably going to be Faithless Looting rather than Lightning Bolt here. So probably 6 damage towards Paul, but... Oh, okay, we see Lightning Bolt. So Paul taking free, then 2 Phoenixes coming back into play. Tons of damage coming towards Paul. And Paul just can't really draw much. Stony Silence makes a lot of the cards in the deck much weaker. Arcbound Ravager is essentially an expensive Arcbound Worker. Steel Overseer is worse than Squire.
Right.
Hangerback Walker, I guess, scales, as does Walking Ballista. But all these cards just made so much worse. And again, very unlikely that Paul boarded in Nature's Claim. Maybe 1 or 2 to sacrifice to gain life, to trigger your own Hangerback Walker.
It's just how could have Paul seen that coming, right?
Yeah, exactly. Paul probably expected something like Ancient Grudge, not Stony Silence. I mean, Paul's fighting the good fight, but this is very underpowered, unfortunately, because of the presence of that Stony Silence.
Wow. Steven Solis with the sick sideboard tech, and boy, has it worked out well for him. Probably catching Paul Rietzel off balance, perhaps with no answers to it in his deck. We don't know.
Yeah, but even with an answer, actually, if Paul drew a Nature's Claim, Paul's at 5, though. That's the problem.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's a major issue here.
Yeah, maybe with a hardened skills in play, I could see, or I could see Paul maybe
Nope,
getting there.
that's
but
going to
no.
do it. The hand gets extended, and Paul Rietzel falls 2-0 to Steven Solis and his Is It Phoenix deck, and Paul can only laugh and say, yeah, you did it.
I mean, that was tech. The tech paid off. Stony Silence, Anger, those sideboard cards are so powerful and completely destroys Paul's deck there.
Yep. Paul is going to have to settle for a strong finish. He's got one more round to play, and he can, make a good cash here. But players like Paul, they'll take it, but that's not why they come to a GP. They're really aiming for that top 8 or trying to take home a trophy. And not this time for Rietzel, but Steven Solis, he came prepared to fight, and it worked out well for him. He is going to put himself one match away from potentially top 8ing this tournament. We're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll have Time Walk for you. Don't go anywhere.